and today we are going to be looking at how to take a pool noodle like this, a tote with a clamp light like this, soaker hoses, and an air pump like this. We're going to use this staple remover as well to kind of add some holes for our soaker hose. It needs a little bit more aeration. And some barbed fittings that we're going to be using to create a cloning station out of this totes. This is going to be something I'll be using for like tomato stems here. We're going to cut some of these stems off and we're going to grow roots on them using this cloning station that we are creating. So let's get going on this new project and see how this works. Okay, so let me go over what you're going to need for this. I gave you guys a brief overview. You're going to use the 1/4-inch soaker hose lines, and we're going to add some additional holes because these tend to be a little bit too small. So we're going to add some bigger holes in order to keep that from having back pressure on the pump. You're going to need an air pump. Now, I have here a 2-line air pump. You technically, with a 4-gallon stacker tote like this, you're only going to need really a 1-line pump. But if you make something a larger reserve, like a 10-gallon reserve or anything larger, you're going to want to have a 2-liner. I have this extra 2-line pump, so I'm going to actually be creating in here the aeration grid around the base with some lines in the middle. And I'm going to create a line in on each side so that, like my 2-line pump right here, I can just run one air line to one side and one to the other. But when you're running with just a single pump, all you really need are a few airline splitters like this. And if you go with something like this, a little T like that, you can easily then connect up a line. This would then connect. You would connect it up like this right here. And then an additional line could go in right here and hook up to one airline on a single airline pump. And that's what I would do with a tote about this size. And you could still run air in both sides of the aeration grid. The advantage of that is it helps to keep the whole entire grid balanced. So I do encourage 2 lines in, and whether you split it so that you can run it with just a single line going in, or you decide to run it like I'm going to set it up with just 2 lines coming out, and we'll connect it right in to both sides of the aeration grid. And I encourage you guys to get black hose airline to connect everything up as opposed to the clear, because it helps keep the algae down. Okay, so we'll be using that. Now, in addition to the soaker hose line, there are a few other parts you're going to want to get. You're going to want to get a 1/4-inch barb tee like this. And then we're going to have something on the corners to go along the side, and that's where these little barbed elbows will come in handy. You'll want to have a pool noodle with an open center, because that'll make it easier for cutting these down. Okay, I've been working on the aeration grid for this cloning station that we're going to be making out of these soaker hose 1/4-inch lines. And you'll notice I put about 4 of these little 3/16 marine grade washers. They're the 5/16 size. I'm putting them on each of the junctions in between here, and mainly to weigh it down. Now, something that's easy to do is, as you're putting these together, it's easy to forget to put these washers on, and then it's kind of a pain because you got to pull them all apart. So there's a couple of things I'm going to give you as far as tips. When you're putting these together, get one segment done at a time. Like this long one right here, if you go all the way across here and just try to put one piece and cut it all the length of what you want, what will happen is you can see with each of the junctions, when you put the junctions in, it adds to the line, the length of it, and it grows. And so what happens if you end up cutting it before as one big long piece before you put the junctions in, you're going to have at least about an inch or so left over, which then is pretty much useless. There's not a whole lot you can do with that. Now we might come up with some kind of aeration grid you can put inside a cup or something, but beyond being able to use it in any other meaningful fashion, it's pretty hard to do that when they're that small. So I recommend work one line at a time, put the junction in, put those washers in as you put them together. And once you have one side done, and then of course do the other side along this way. I kind of do the ones in between because you want the side on the other side to match exactly where these junction points are. So like in the case of this one, when I go to cut this length, I make sure that it matches the length on the other side so that we'll have an exact matchup. When I put my little T going in right here, and obviously my end piece, my angle piece right there, this will fit right in here to finish out this line, and everything will match up perfectly. As you're working on these fittings, you're going to have to apply a bit of pressure to push these on. Sometimes it helps just to kind of get them started and then just push them hard with your hands. And like what I like to do when I have these T's is I just put one in one side and then I kind of push them both together, and then I'll go to the last little piece here on the corner and I'll just take your hand and squeeze against it and it'll fit right in. Now I want to remind you guys, you're going to want to put your air inlets on both sides. And the important thing to do with that, you want to make sure we have a check valve. The air line coming from the pump and the arrow is pointing the correct direction to go into your aeration grid. So it's blowing into the grid and will prevent water from flowing out of the grid when the pump is off. Now that we have our air lines hooked up, we're ready to just add a few more holes. I use this staple remover and just put in, just kind of go through and just put a few extra holes. And what that does is it helps prevent back pressure on the pump, because even though this is a porous sucker hose line, it tends to put quite a bit of pressure. They're just a little bit too small. In addition to putting these on top, I also turn it like this and put them on the side. Well, this is what it looks like when you have a good coverage with your grid and holes throughout. There are some places you don't see the bubbles come up, and that's just because of kind of the way this is. It still has a lot of holes, but you see how if you bend it certain ways, certain parts will bubble more than others, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that this centerpiece is a little bit higher. So obviously the point that is higher up is going to get more of the air coming out of the hose, but it's still aerating this reserve very well, even if some of the places, you know, are not showing the bubbles as directly because it's lower in the reserve. You can always add a few more holes if you want to, but it will change where the air is coming out the more you mess with it. And the key really is to keep this reserve with a lot of bubbles, even if it's not directly under the stems that you put in here. Like I say, you have a stem over here and it's not as aerated as a set over here. It's still going to do a really good job of getting those roots stimulated so that they grow well. Those stems will grow those roots, because the aeration really, even though it's only coming out in some of these spots, will be aerating the entire reserve. Now we're with our pool noodle, we are going to create a little cloning collar for each of our stems here. Okay, so I have cut off a segment of the pool noodle and I am going to cut down just one portion of it. Yeah, that should work. That'll give a little bit more of like a raft situation. And then what we can do is just cut it down to like the middle. So we have a way for the stalk to sit right in here and hold it firmly. So let's give it a try with our first one here. And just kind of stick the stalk in. Try not to rub it too much while it goes in. And see, yeah, I think that's going to work. Right there you can see I have all the stems here, just kind of sitting upright. And I do kind of brace them against each other to kind of hold them up so they don't fall over, because if I just put it by itself, see how it wants to fall over. So I just kind of put them together like that. There we go. Now they hold each other up. And this is against the edge here, so it kind of holds each other. And if I wanted to put more stems in here, I could fill out the rest of this with a little floating raft like that. As you can see, it just cut it down and just stick it right in there. You can see this is going to be like perfect. The nice size stem. It could root out all the way through here, and down underneath it'll root. So this is going to be really good for these guys. We'll just make sure that we brace them along the edge, give them proper support so they don't drown in the water. I could put that against the edge. That'll work. Yeah, and then the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of nutrients. This here is Maxi Grow, and all you need really is about a teaspoon per gallon of water. I have probably only about 2 gallons in here, and this large measuring portion is 3 teaspoons because it's a tablespoon, and the smaller one is about a teaspoon. So adding this nutrient, this hydroponic solution, even if you're planning on putting these in the ground, will just help them not yellow while you're rooting the stems. Oh wow, will you look at this? This is about a week and a half or 2. I'm not sure we're at 2 weeks yet. But look at the rack of roots on this stem. Incredible. Wow. This one's like, it's ready to be planted. Or maybe what we'll do is we'll stick this out in another hydroponic kit. Or maybe I'll just stick it in there and grow them with hydroponics. They do really well when you transplant them from this root cloning station and right into a deep water culture hydroponics. They do really well. Now you'll notice some of the leaves have gotten a little bit, I'm probably going to cut these guys off, yellowed up a little bit, because that kind of happens when they're in here trying to develop roots. Even though I did put some nutrients, it looks like it's losing some of the nutrients it needs. I do have trouble with them yellowing when I'm first rooting them out, but that's nothing to worry about at this point. We'll just cut the bad leaves off and get it planted into my deep water culture bins with brand new nutrients, and it'll do just fine. Let's look at some of the others here. These are some stems I stuck in here, and you can see one of them's developed some roots on it. I'm gonna probably do something with that. It's definitely yellowing, so it needs to get some new nutrients for sure. And then let's look at this one over here. Okay, this one over here isn't doing a whole lot. You can see there at the bottom there's a little bit of some roots coming out, but it didn't really take off. And you look at the stalk, I don't really understand why, other than if you look carefully at this one in comparison to my other ones. This one, I'm going to back up just a little bit. You could see how this one had a lot of young leaves on it. And this one, maybe those leaves weren't quite as young. Sometimes the older stalks take a little bit more to get rooted. And that could be what's going on with this one. Maybe it wasn't as young of a stalk as some of these others. But oh my goodness, this one is the king of this whole root cloning operation. I think it took off the best. I'm definitely going to get this one out. These guys, these are just some stems. I'm not even sure they're going to make really good plants because they don't really have the branches that I look for. But I just thought I'd stick them in here anyway. And yeah, I like it branching out like this one is. So this is definitely going to take off and do really well as a tomato plant. But then again, maybe I'll stick these guys in deep water cultures to see how they develop. Sometimes they turn into you know, tomato plants, these guys will spread out a little more, some of these stems sometimes. But when it doesn't have a wide branch, it doesn't always do anything really. It kind of needs like this stem that branches out. That's really ideal. This is perfect for getting my tomato plant going. And if I'm going to do soil, I like to have a good 2-3 inches of roots before I even try to get it converted to soil, because I've noticed with hydroponic root cloning like this that sometimes they just they don't always take very well to the soil. So I like to get a lot of roots before I try putting them into soil. But this one is perfect. These are perfect to just go ahead and throw into deep water culture hydroponics. They always take when I do that. And this guy, I think I'm going to need to leave him in here just a tad bit longer, because he really doesn't have a whole lot going on just yet. I think maybe another couple weeks and maybe we'll have some roots on him. Alright, so there you go. This is what our cloning experiment yielded. Oh, and I also wanted to point, this is another little one that kind of broke off when I was trying to plant them in here. It broke off accidentally, but it's starting to develop a few little roots there, and we'll see if we get anything. Alright, so there you have it. This is what root cloning looks like. Some of these leaves that fell into the water, I'm going to have to cut them off because they're starting to rot. We don't want to have that around here. So there you have it. This is what it looks like when we have our roots cloned in our new root cloning station. This one is ready to get planted in my deep water culture system, and I'll do that next. Happy gardening, everybody, and I'll see you again next time.